everyone. So before I get started, I'm just going to continue on with just acknowledging that I'm talking today in stolen land, but that we all live and benefit from stolen land every day. Am I speaking loud enough? I always feel weird holding a microphone. And on that note, that it's important to remember, although through the year we have markers of this land's First Nations people, that actually that work happens every single day, and it's not always monetary. It's in the way that we think, it's in the way that we decolonise our spaces, represent our spaces, allow First Nations people, Aboriginal people, Black people, POC people, queer people, all of these marginalised people to access our spaces in an equitable way, and so they feel that they have ownership over them too. So all those things are tied in together. And I'll probably, I imagine, talk a bit more on that because it will tie into Pony Club Gym. All right, this is going to be a bit of a journey today because when I got the word sanctuary, and we had a little definition of it, and so I looked up sanctuary and the definition, and basically it's a place where we feel safe from harm, where we can rest and all of those things. And I thought a bit more on that, and most people think of it maybe as a home, or I don't know, it could be at the ocean or it could be somewhere. And actually what I started to think about was recently someone asked me this question and it really stuck with me. So I've had this really interesting conversations with this lovely person and journalist from the ABC who's been coming into the gym and doing classes and talking to me because they're writing a piece on the gym. And they asked me, what makes Pony Club Gym? And I was like, and I had to really think on it because I actually didn't know what to say. And what I realized was actually what makes it what it is it's just me. It's literally a physical form of me. And so I know that for a lot of people, Pony Club Gym is a sanctuary, and it is for me as well. It started out of my garage, which you can see up in the corner. It's grown quite a bit from that time. That was 4 years ago. And I'll talk a bit more on that later because I thought, well, if the gym's a reflection of me, who am I? I've only got half an hour, so I'll try and catch that in half an hour. And how did this come to be? And also what I thought about it is actually that sanctuary, I think when people think of sanctuary, we think about a safe place or things that are not harmful. And what I realised is actually sanctuary doesn't necessarily mean that either. I've definitely had sanctuaries or things that I consider are a sanctuary in my life that people would consider very dangerous. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that. So I'm going to read off my phone for one short moment because although I don't believe in perfection, I believed I got a really good capture of this memory that I had. So I wrote about this a few years ago, and it starts like this. The day I started my mum's friend's car with a fork was a day I probably shouldn't have ignored my intuition. I say my mum's friend's car, but I'd actually stolen it with a fork. That burning in the gut, something impending, and a quick glimpse into events that might unfold very soon if you make the wrong choice, which I did. But we needed to sell, and I just need to trigger warn you, I'm going to talk about drug use and drugs for anyone that has lived experience of that. But we needed to sell this last bit of heroin. If we wouldn't have the money to score, and if we didn't, we wouldn't have the money to score our next lot, which means no heroin for us, but for anyone, but more importantly, none for us. And when I say we, it was myself and my friend Danny and fellow companion user at the time. More about Danny later though. The car was tiny, kind of comical really, fork in the ignition, tiny as a matchbox, and a blue that could be seen on the furthest horizon. Also, I didn't have my license and the car was manual and I grinded through the gears when the high-pitched whining got too much. That's how I taught myself to drive. I grew up in Burlew, by the way, in Perth. We parked at East Perth train station and I wound down my window to let the air breeze in. Now, at this point, I had a very clear voice in my head screaming at me to wind the window back up. Just a bad feeling, and I shook it off in my heroin sedation and left it down. The people we were selling to pulled up behind our car. I had their little small packets of heroin in my lap and my pockets stuffed with $50 and $100 bills. I looked through the rear view mirror and waited for them to get out and come to my window. They would hand over the cash and I'd hand over the little tiny packets of heroin I had neatly made up earlier in the day. I looked down into my lap to scoop the packets up, and it was at that moment a hand slipped through the window and held a knife to my throat. Now, there have been 2 times in my life where people have been near me with a knife for things other than food prep, and this was the first. I'll tell you about the other one later on, but I'm not going to today, but you can ask me. I'm not usually one to freeze in times of panic, but I was trapped. We were fucked either way. Refused to hand over stuff and just maybe they were crazy enough to cut my throat, or hand all the heroin and cash over, and Danny and I would be sick as dogs later on. And without all our cash that we owed our dealer for the big amount we had bought, we were totally fucked. That being said, I practically threw all the packets at them and quickly started ripping the cash out of my pocket and throwing it out of the window like confetti. This was enough for said knife to exit my window and for them to scoop up their loot and tear off in an equally comical car. My heart was racing. I just wanted to get out of there, so I reached down to start the car and there was nothing there. In the panic of the moment, I didn't realise that they had taken the fork out of the ignition. The fork had gone with them. I sat there wondering about them driving madly away with a lap full of heroin, money and a knife and fork in each hand as if they had just been served dinner. One of the things you learn as a junkie is tenacity and problem solving. And Danny and I had 12 hours to come up with $600, which at that time in the mid-90s was an insurmountable amount. Trying to do this whilst your body feels like it's about to experience the worst flu ever to enter the Earth's atmosphere is not pleasurable. But that sweet reward of mixing up your fix, finding that sweet spot in your vein and the initial feeling of warmth that floods through you is the ultimate motivator. So we hustled from whoever we possibly could with promises of lies and elaborate stories. And at 7 a.m. we made our way back to our blue Matchbox car with a new fork in hand. We started the car and smiling like idiots and feeling sick as only a junkie starting to hang out could. We sped out to Warwick, paid our dealers and got a whole new lot of heroin. I just wanted to start with that story because it really captures the absurdity of life and also of my life and the journey that it's been to create what I have. And really, I wanted to talk about all the significant sanctuaries that I've experienced through my life that have got me to where I am, and that what makes this space what it is. And there's a few people here that have been part of the space, and Mikey included, that can tell you what it is. But the best way to understand it is to understand who I am. So I wanted to sort of talk about what are sanctuaries, or what have sanctuaries been for me. So if I go back to being a young person, my home was a very fractured home. I didn't live in a consistent family home. And in fact, the most consistent home I had was with my nana. And I actually learnt from a very young age, because of things that happened to me in family home where things are supposed to be safe, that lying was my way of keeping safe. So lies became a sanctuary for me. Ways to hide who I was, ways to hide what was happening, ways to create something that felt safe, lies to create who I was, and all of those things. And that was my sanctuary to keep myself safe, because when you're young, that's sometimes all you have. And I think certainly many people that experience that in their life, especially that people who sit in those margins, who don't fit into our cookie cutter idea of what society is or what it's structured around. So that was my sanctuary as a young person, creating imaginary places, who I was, stories, to my friends that I made, and all of those kind of things. And eventually, as I grew up, and I left home when I was in and out of homes, but left finally what was family home when I was 15. I moved in with all my punker friends, and that was the first experience I had of actually a home, where we're all looking after each other. We lived on nothing. We ate, deep rehydrated potato. And I think on the day that we'd get Centrelink, I bought a salad roll once a fortnight, and that was like the best thing I'd ever eaten in my life. But within that, we had lots and lots of drug use. And when I say lots of drug use, I went hard in. And that starting story gives you an idea of that. So I was a heroin user for a good part of a decade. And heroin was a sanctuary for me. It made me feel good. It wiped all of the things that I didn't want to think about, that made me feel uncomfortable, that actually made me feel unsafe, and took that all away. And although I had put myself in incredibly unsafe situations using, because I had to, because that's the nature of using, it also was a salve. And I think it's really important to remember that, because it's really easy for people to walk out on the street and see someone that they may feel is a drug user or a junkie or all of those things, and really box them in and not have an understanding of that is that person's sanctuary right now. That may be the safest thing that they have, and it's important that we know that, because only in understanding that all different things are sanctuary and they look many different ways, it's the only way we can create spaces that think about all people in that way, that all people experience space and life differently. So I had a good old time for 10 years, / it was a complete train wreck. And I was finally arrested. And I say finally, I'd been in trouble quite a lot of times with the police. But I was finally arrested when I was 21. So I'd been using since I was quite young, before I was a teenager. And I thought I was being arrested for something quite minor. And I got to the police station, and we're sitting there, and they're not doing anything. And then these two other police came and they said, come with us. And these were the federal police. And I got taken into Perth Federal Police Station, and I'm sitting at the table, and they lay all these photos down, and I'm looking at them, and they're like, who's that in that photo? I'm like, I don't know. And I was really mouthy at that time too. Anyway, I'm looking at them a bit closer, and what I suddenly realised is it was me. It was me, and I couldn't recognise myself at all. And not only was it me, but it was photos of me from 2 years. So they'd been following me for 2 years. And they'd finally arrested me for quite serious charges, federal charges, because I'd worked for the main importers of heroin in Western Australia. But what that actually did was set off a chain of events that was a huge turning point in starting me on a whole new path. And so I went to court, and we did deals, and I did deals with the police because I'd been paying off police, and all of this huge stories, which is quite interesting, which I can tell you about another time. But I ended up being sent across to Aotearoa, New Zealand, A, for witness protection, and A, to do a drug rehab program. And I ended up with this incredible woman, Ma Betty Warp, who was a Māori elder, and she ran a live-in residential rehab program then there for prison release. So I went there. And honestly, when I first went there, I just thought, great, I have 6 months off, I'll go back, I'll have no tolerance, it'll be really cheap to buy heroin, everything's going to be so good, can go back to life. But really, it was the first experience I'd had of a home. And when I say a home, what it meant to have dinner at the normal time, get up in the morning, make my bed, get breakfast together, clean a house, go and do something. And there was like this real kind of, and people talk about, well, why do people feel so comfortable being in prison? Because it sets this safe kind of routine, and we're all bound by it. We all are bound by routines, whether we like it or not. It makes us feel secure. So that felt like a sanctuary for me. And also more than that, Betty Walk, she felt like a sanctuary for me. She felt safe. And it's something that I really thought about a lot this week is sanctuary sits in other people too. There's other people in our lives that for whatever reason just feel good. They just feel safe to be around. We don't even have to think about trust. It's just innate. It just feels that way with them. And she really felt like that for me. And we became very, very close. And she took me on as a child and called me one of her children. And I ended up staying with her for 4.5 years and living over there. And it was probably the first time I started to get a sense of community as well, because we all lived in the same house. There was like up to 20 of us at any one time. So we learnt to coexist with all of our differences. We learnt to speak the truth, have arguments, all of those things and disagreements, and being like, great, and then move on and still live together. So yeah, that was sort of my real sort of understanding of what it meant for home space or people to be a sanctuary. So that bring me into my mid-20s, and I moved to Melbourne. I had no intention of going back to Perth really, because I didn't really actually feel safe to go back to Perth. And Melbourne seemed the place to be, and here I am 25 years later. And I've had a really wide range of work history. So I've worked in homelessness, I've worked in drug and alcohol, I worked in the music industry with Big Day Out for a long time. I worked in local government. But I've always worked with people for the most part, or in the creative world. And this is where we start to get to Pony Club Jib. This is also like 40 years of my life reduced to half an hour. So there's a lot of stories in there. If you think the fork one was good, I've got some better ones than that. But anyway, so I ended up working at local government. And this is not to poo-poo government, but I'm gonna. I worked for local government for 8 years in community development, so developing communities, yeah? But what I actually started to realise was you can't do that in bureaucracy because it's not built for it. Systems are not built for change. They don't want change. Actually, they're quite resistant in many ways. They don't want anything rocking the boat. They find it very hard to look outside of a narrow view. So it became quite difficult for me. And my integrity was always put on the line in that way, because I'm like, well, if this person needs this in the community, and let's just do this thing. And they're like, no, but we don't have the policy and we don't have the, all that. So it became really frustrating for me. And so, on the side of working for local government, I always coached. I was coaching Olympic weightlifting, started in coaching CrossFit many moons ago. So I always did it as a side thing. Anyway, what I decided to do was, I was like, I'm quitting my job. I'm just going to quit my job I can't do this. My integrity is like more important than anything. I've always been a punker. I'm not one to follow rules. If something doesn't feel right, just don't do it. So I took a year and a half off, and I was very, very lucky to do so, might I add. And I just happened to live in this house in Reservoir, which was like the best house. It was like a 70s dream Italian mansion with the 2 kitchens, one that had never been used because it was for show. And then the one downstairs where you made your salamis and passata and all that. And then it had the amazing brick garage, 4x3 brick garage, which Giuseppe kept his Commodore in, and it was like beautifully kept. And I was like, well, maybe I'll just put a little gym space in there. Because as a queer, trans-identified person, I have always experienced, and I say this across the board, there has not been a gym I haven't gone into that hasn't been overtly uncomfortable for me or doesn't represent me in any particular way at all. And actually, representation is highly important in how we feel about ourselves. If we don't see ourselves, how do we even exist? Yeah. So it's really important to remember that the spaces we make, if we're thinking about sanctuary, where people feel safe, how are those people represented? And not in glib ways where we're saying this place is inclusive. You can say it's inclusive all you want. That doesn't make it so. What makes it so is talking to people and then being able to contribute and put themselves into space. So I thought, I don't want to train in these spaces anymore. I don't even know if I want to coach in these spaces anymore. Maybe I'll make a little gym. Maybe a few people will come. Maybe not. We'll see. Anyway, so I made the first thing that was made by the wonderful Mikey Ting was that sign. That's changed as well now. Now the sign has fat phobia at the top as well, which is a very important addition. And there's many things that could go on there if I'm going to be truthful. So we built the gym, and in January of, it's so hard to remember years because of COVID, 2019, I opened up to a few people. So we had classes. It was a cute little gym, maybe room for about like 10 people, and it was packed. And coming into winter, it was, Melbourne's a horribly freezing cold place. Why we all live here, I don't know. But I was starting to think, it's getting really cold. I probably should look for a job again. But actually what was happening was it was getting busier. And so I was like, maybe I need to look for a bigger space because something's going on here. So I thought about getting a bigger commercial space, and it's how I came to meet Mikey, because I needed and wanted to share that space with someone and make it a co-working space where we both could lift each other up and start our first new things. Because for anyone that has is a small business owner or a startup, it's not easy. It's not easy, and you're really having to work out creative ways to make that business thrive and survive. So we found a space in November of 2019. Got the keys in January of 2020. And everything was going to be great. Yeah. Who knew what was to come? So we actually, renovated the whole space and built the whole space January, February into March, and had this open date of March. I can't even remember. I've wiped it out of my mind from the trauma. Anyway, the nuts and bolts, we were due to open the first day of lockdown. So that was that. So everyone knows the journey that time was. The gym was closed for a total of 17 months of 2 years. But we were really lucky to have built was an incredible community, and we actually managed to continue that concept of community and sanctuary, which can be interchangeable, I would say, online. And I did online classes when I felt I could. We did a lot of community stuff though. We did a community online party with like some of the gym members doing trivia. We had performers. We had a DJ playing. We raised money. I think we raised $3,500 that evening. Half went to decolonise sex work. The other half went to pay the rent. And then I think we had bouts of being open, which was really great. And then I think we had that last big lockdown. And by that time I had absolutely lost my mind, I think, and was just getting the absolute shits, because I think that was about the time that the government had pulled out providing support for small business, etc. Yeah. So we wonderfully were able to raise, I did a crowdfunding for artists, small business owners, sex workers that were impacted by the closure of spaces and places. And we raised an amazing 33 grand in 7 days, and were able to give just over 33 grand to, I think it was 127 people, which was incredible. Which really is not a reflection on me, but is a reflection on what a tight, safe community can do. I always have believed that real change comes from grassroots and individual people and tight communities working together. I've never waited for systemic change. There's no point. I'll be like dead and gone before that happens. Change comes from us, and we can really make that change. But anyway, so we've got all through that. And now the gym has been open. I think we've all been open just for over a year. And the gym has progressively grown in that time. So both in people coming, but also in physical space. We now have allied health practitioners that work in the space too. That was always something that I'd envisioned a long time ago, is like, well, if we're making this space for movement, and I don't call Pony Club Gym a fitness space. I just, I don't really prescribe to the normal sort of rhetoric of the fitness world. The gym isn't about looking a certain way. It isn't about doing a certain thing. It's about coming in and moving in a way that you want to because it feels good, period. We just happen to teach movement in a particular way. Some people like it, some people don't, and that's fine. But also we do a lot of the community stuff. It's really important to me. I have modelled the gym on what it feels like for me to be at home, my version of what home is now, what I have made myself home. I have pictures of myself as a little person in the hallway. The kitchen is set up so that people sit in it and gather around. There's lots of artwork. There's nothing worse than going into spaces that are supposed to make us feel comfortable. I mean, hospitals are case in point. They're really sterile environments. I think when you're feeling when you're feeling very vulnerable, going into those environments is quite cutting. It's quite a harsh place to be. It's certainly not it's not a relaxing place to be. So I really always have tried to, because the gym started in my literal home, I've tried to keep it how it looks in that way. It's got lots of plants because I love plants. So coming back to the original thing of answering the ABC writer's question on, oh, well, what makes Pony Club Gym what it is? It is, like I said, it's a reflection of me. And I have had a really quite crazy life, actually, if I really think about it. But it really gave me the ability to understand that all of us have very different lived experiences. No one's experience is the same as anyone else. We might identify by language a certain way. That doesn't mean we have the same experience or same feeling on what a sanctuary is or what feels safe to us. And that's an ongoing thing I have to think about. Who might not feel safe to access this space? Why don't they feel safe to access this space? I've moved away from this idea of inclusion and have moved closer to the idea of not making places exclusive. Inclusion sort of denotes this thing of like, I'm going to include you. It's an invite. Saying I'm making this non-exclusive is me saying, I leave that decision to you. And that really is where it sits at. People decide what is a sanctuary for them. I can't tell anyone, this is a sanctuary for you, this is a safe space. That you can't do that. You can't do that. I don't know what a person's experience is. Only they can decide that for themselves. And so I hope for the space that continues to be so. Pony Club Gym is queer owned, but anyone is welcome in the space. We have so much to learn from each other by not just sitting in our bubbles. We all just sit in our safe little bubbles of people that are like us because those are our sanctuaries. But it's really important that sometimes we open those doors up a little bit and sit in other people's bubbles too. It's the only way to learn from each other. And like you say, to move away from going to Australia Day parties to going, actually, this is fucked up. Like, why are we doing this? It's okay to feel uncomfortable and to sit in feeling uncomfortable because that space doesn't feel safe to you, because it challenges you in some way, because you don't understand it, you don't get it, all of those things. But it really is the only way to create change and to create more safety and more sanctuary rather than having to, we've kind of created this world where we have to make it. It's kind of an odd thing really, rather than just going, well, this is kind of my feeling of going to the rehab in Aotearoa. It just was open. Ma Betty just was like, I don't care what you do. I don't care if you swear at me. I don't care if you've done this. I don't care if you've done that. I don't care what you've done. Come on in. Are you hungry? Let me feed you. I'm going to give you a bed. No matter what. And I learnt a lot from that. She is a painting on the wall in the gym. I always look to her to go as quite an exceptional person, actually, to be able to put aside someone's history or who they are or what they have done, and, some pretty sort of, I would say, full-on people came through that space in relation to historical crime and violence. But to actually be able to put that aside and perhaps create their first example of what it meant to feel safe outside of outside of violence, outside of crime and all those things. So that's my thoughts on sanctuary. I probably have many more, but it is what has made Pony Club Gym what it is, because it is literally just me. That's all it is. I don't know how you replicate it. I don't know how to tell you to replicate it. All you can really do is make spaces that make sense to you. Yeah, that's it.
Don't go anywhere.
I won't.
You can hold on the mic as well.
Yeah.
I've got some questions for Ella.
So do you think you'd open a second gym?
You're not the first person to ask. Yeah, am thinking about opening a second one, possibly later this year. The most important thing for me is that I can stay very much involved with the gym, because it needs to stay the same. It's never going to be a franchise gym. It's not that space. Also, as well, because I'm very, I'll use the word particular, but probably more thoughtful about who I have coaching the space. It's not just about having coaches that know how to coach the movements. It's people that have a similar ideology to me and understand where it comes from. That's really important. So we'll only open another one if those things can all align, basically. Yeah. Yeah.
Are you still in touch with anyone from New Zealand in that experience?
No, not from New Zealand. I actually am very lucky to have my two oldest and closest friends. We've been friends for 35 years. One of them went through being a user at the same time. So, and my other one didn't, but they've seen it all. They've seen it all, and I think especially one of them is probably could tell you, like, the fact that I'm standing here alive is an absolute miracle. I should have died many times over, but no, I am still in touch with them. Everyone else flicked away, and I had to make that decision to step out completely outside of that world.
Sorry, I forgot her name.
Ma Betty. Ma Betty died 18 years ago. Yeah. So she was in her, if I think about it, probably she would have been about 65 when I first landed there. She was an incredible woman, really. She was a spearhead in what was called the Tent Embassy in Aotearoa in the 70s, which was securing housing rights for the Māori people across Aotearoa and in Auckland. And she was the first ever Māori woman on a local government council. And because of that, actually secured empty government properties in Auckland and made them into what was called the Ngāti Arahanui Trust. And they became post-prison released rehabs and also for young homeless people, because she could see that all of her young tamariki or young people were living on the streets, and there was all these empty government houses. So she was an incredible woman. She never earned money. She got a government payment. That too went into the trust. The only thing she kept money for is once everyone had gone to sleep in the evening, I'd take her out about once a month and drive her to the casino. And I'd sit there next to her while she was on the pokies, and I'd light her Alpine cigarettes for her. Yeah, so that was the treat. Oh, and we went to bingo too. Yeah, yeah, yeah. You can ask me anything you want as well. I'm an open book.
I've never asked you before. I know you just went back to Perth.
Yeah.
What's it like for you to go back to Perth?
It's funny, actually. Well, it's not funny, but I did go back to Perth for a little while after rehab. It was terrifying, actually. The people that I had worked for were terrifying people. They were they weren't people that used. They were serious dealers. I saw some very scary things. And I actually spent the first year thinking I was going to be shot. I had recurring nightmares about it for years and years, even after I left Perth. I still to this day can't sit in certain spaces with my back to the doors because I still have that visceral feeling.
You look exactly the same as you did like when you were 16.
Yeah.
So going back must be, like, you're still the same person to a lot of people.
Yeah, I don't know if people would actually recognise me though. It's like I said, I looked in those photos at myself and I could barely recognise myself. But I think, because it's an energy and how you are inside, so it kind of changes how you look as well. My mum could probably vouch a bit better on how similar I look.
She does.
Yeah. She's got some great whopper stories, actually. So do I. But yeah. I don't have those feelings associated with Perth anymore. It's my life's changed so much, and actually the place has changed so much as well. I still get very visceral feelings sometimes seeing people who are in certain states or those kind of things. I hold a high level of compassion for that. I also, it's always also good to know, like, even the other day I was walking through Hosier Lane, and this is what I mean by sanctuaries can be in people. It can be in tiny interactions. I was walking through Hosier Lane the other day, and there's a homelessness service in Hosier Lane as well. So it's this really weird intermingle of two worlds of that and then tourists going through taking photos of the graffiti. So I went up there's a little back laneway, and there was a woman there, and she was sitting down and she was just mixing up and was about to inject whatever she was using. And we clocked each other and she said, "I'm so sorry." And I was like, "Don't you even worry," and that for her and me, I don't know what it meant for her, but it meant so much that I could just go, "You don't even worry about that. I'm not judging you," and those things are really important. I think a lot of people would walk past things like that and people like that and just have how you are with people can make a huge difference, and they can be in really small interactions. And I think it's really important to remember those things. It's really important to remember that in those spaces, but I come back to in the spaces that we make, that you actually really think about those things as well. Yeah. We get really caught in our little sanctuaries, in our little bubbles, and only sort of creating for those. But actually for a lot of people, how we represent them in space is highly important. And we're beyond, and I'm even talking about really pushing yourselves, getting even beyond about, pushing yourselves beyond like pronouns, how we identify, really going there, like really going beyond that stuff as well. Not just what we think we should be doing, just continually thinking about what else can I do? What else can I do? Yeah. Yeah.
So in regards to that, from a training perspective,
Yeah.
being what was like big box gym culture.
Yeah.
How did you handle or manage working with people who probably saw it as this is what males are training, this is what females are training, versus train today, which is training a person and who they are in that moment in that day, what mood they want to do, what feels comfortable. How do you manage that conflict?
Look, at the time, and I keep this contextually because so much has changed over the last 20 years as well. It's really sort of within our, in our society, we really love to create boxes. It makes us feel comfortable. This is who this person is. This is who this person is. I'm using this language. I'm using that language. I've never been too caught up in that. The same as for me personally, I'm happy with he, she, or they pronouns. People can decide what that is for them. People will still put me in a box anyway. That's just the way we're conditioned to. I'm Ella. Who am I beyond that? There's a lot more to that. How I teach now and how I practice now, we're a trauma-informed practice gym. Our coaches have that training. It's basically the understanding, and on the note of like men train this way, women train this way, it's still taught. That's still taught in the basic PT certification. How do you train? What program are you giving to this person? Is there a man? What person are you giving to this? It's so crazy. Like physiology is physiology, and people have different abilities, comfortabilities Also, people have different, all different things, because people can feel very different on any given day. I think how I approach coaching now is it's a collaboration in a way. I am merely the holder of the technical movement and how to impart that, and pick up on cues and movement patterns and areas where people might need work. But I don't sit in people's body. I literally don't know what a movement feels like in someone's body. It might feel shit, and that's okay too. It sometimes can. It sometimes can feel not good. It can also sometimes not feel like you want to do today. I really try and create a space where someone can say to me, actually, I don't want to do that. Like, yes, that's programmed on the board, but actually I don't want to do that. People should be allowed to do that. Movement, first and foremost, should feel good. Our bodies are literally made to move. We're just the idiots in developed countries that have to make spaces just to move. In any other country, you'd be doing it as part of your daily survival practice. So people know their bodies best. You have to allow people to be able to start to articulate and start to know what that is for themselves. We have kind of created a world where we remove people from not to have any relationship with themselves or their bodies at all, not to know what is best for them. It's created in hierarchy all the time, in medical systems, in gendered systems, in cisnormative systems, in patriarchal systems. We take people's autonomy away from them all the time, down to the minutia of got to be at work at 9, got to work to 5. What if that's not your most productive time of the day? Because you have different neurodivergencies that actually allow you to be more focused at different times of the day. Makes no sense. So people, it's the same as like the membership structure at Pony Club Gym. If you become a member, we have everything from waged to unwaged to mutual aid. Everyone under 18 trains for free there. Someone from a very large corporate entity asked me, well, how do you know if someone's unwaged? Like, do you get them to show the healthcare card? I was like, fuck no, I don't. I'm not policing people. I trust people. That's it. People will do the right thing. Yeah, that's it. So, it's a bit of like being able to get out of that business mindset too. Yes, I have to have a business mindset as well, because I need Pony Club Gym to survive and thrive for our community. The idea for me one day is that I just get to hand it to someone so it can continue on. It's always community driven and owned. But Pony Club Gym doesn't exist so I can feed and house myself at all. Yeah. That just comes, hopefully. Yeah. Yeah. Does that answer the question?
Yes, and I'm in more as well. And I think it's like I myself like training for sport, and there are times when even I myself have gone to the gym and saying, oh, physically work actually. No, that's not good for me, or that's not really I can do to avoid injuries or this and that.
Right.
So does it face that when you don't fit like totally what PT has learned?
It takes a lot of unpacking. It's not like I don't unpack that stuff myself. I have a lot of body dysphoria because of my gender identity and stuff. But what I keep trying to tell myself and come back to is like, I just move to feel joyful and good, and what feels good for me on that day. I also accept that I'm not going to feel good every day, and that's okay too. Yeah. Yeah.
100%.
Yeah, that's just normal. Yeah, yeah. This idea of, I think, and I mean no disrespect, because I know some people need this for themselves. I'm not this kind of toxic positivity person where it's like, seize a day your better self. For me, there is no better self. There's just you today. And you could be a really shit day, could be a really good day. I think it's important. That's important because it's important to feel uncomfortable. And if we're coming back to that thing of sanctuary, we need to feel safe in those moments too. That actually I feel out of my mind and not good, but I'm okay. I'm safe. Yeah.
We've got time for one more question, if anyone's got one.
Yeah.
What kind of mix? Like, do you have more kind of plans and ideas that you want to do as separate to the gym?
I've always got ideas. Yeah, like too many actually. As one of my coaches says, like, Ella, just like, let's just slow down. I've always got ideas. I literally can't help it. Apart from another gym, actually this opportunity actually came up recently, and it was like, this is like my dream come true. We're actually going to be running we ran our first non-gendered, no weight class Olympic weightlifting comp last year. I've been approached by a contemporary gallery to run it as almost like a performance piece on commentary of gender and identity. So so that's the next big thing that's on the horizon. Thank you so much.
Ella, thank you so much. That was incredible. And
Welcome.
after knowing you just for an hour, I'm glad that you're creating spaces that reflect you.
Thank
because
you.
I think we could use more of you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah, one more time.